What's happening, everybody? It's Sean with Reactions to the Classics. And Jay, we got a fantastic top 10 songs put together by the daughter of two of our late patrons who we just lost last year, Doug and Cheryl, and their daughter Jade put this together, top 10 of their favorite songs. So I don't have any background on this. I'll say that Doug was a patron for a long time. He passed away last summer, and then Cheryl passed away just this past December, just a month ago when I'm filming this. So Jade wanted to put this together. I think it's a fantastic thing that she did. So without further ado, let's get into Doug and Cheryl's favorite songs, top 10. And there are some absolute classic bangers on here, as you would imagine. We're going to start off with number 10, Can't Take My Eyes Off of You. Frankie Valli, a single in 1967. It's written by Bob Crewe and Bob Gaudio, the first recorded and released as a single by Gaudio's Four Seasons bandmate Frankie Valli. The song was among his biggest hits, earning a gold record, reaching number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100, making it his biggest solo hit until his 1975 hit, My Eyes Adored You. Gaudio described the song as, quote, the one that almost got away until Windsor, Ontario radio station CKLW, a station also serving the Detroit Metro on the American side of the border, so a lot of power there, right, intervened. In 1967, the record's producers urged Paul Drew, program director at the station, to consider the tune for rotation. For much of the 60s and 70s, CKLW is credited with launching hit records via its powerful signal, blanketing the Great Lakes region. Drew did not warm to the song at first, but accepted an invitation to hear it live at the Rooster Tail, where Valli was performing a week-long stint with the Four Seasons. He liked what he heard, added the song to his station's playlist, and, as Gaudio recalled, the switchboards lit up, and the rest, as they say, is history. 2 in Canada as well. I tell you all to just tell you, the power that radio stations had back in the day was insane, right? Somebody's going to have the power in the music industry, but back then the radio stations could make or break you. All right, I'm going to have the lyrics up as always. Thanks again, Jade. All right, Can't Take My Eyes Off You. It's just a song of that time, just professing the love, right? And just praise that she's going to stay with him. He even says that in the song, but Frankie sounds fantastic here. He said the song really excited him because he wanted to get out of singing falsetto all the time. So that was another interesting thing on this, and it obviously proved the concept that he did not have to do that, but it's just really a classic love song. And speaking of classics, number 9, Stand By Me, Ben E. King in 1961, written by Ben along with Jerry Lieber and Mike Stoller, who together used the pseudonym Elmo Glick. According to Ben, the title was derived from, it was inspired by a spiritual written by Sam Cooke and J.W. Alexander called Stand By Me, Father, which was recorded by the Soul Stirrers with Johnny Taylor singing lead. It has some other famous stuff to it, right? Work. This guy would have known it when I was 15 years old. Featured on the soundtrack of the 1986 film Stand By Me, which is a fantastic movie featuring Morgan Freeman. It was also featured in a 1987 European commercial of Levi's 501 jeans. Now, back then, Levi's 501 jeans were a cultural phenomenon, so those commercials were huge. That commercial contributed to its greater success in Europe. In 2012, so I'm filming this in 2025, 13 years ago, its royalties were estimated to have topped $22.8 million, making it the 6th highest earning song of its era. 50% of the royalties were paid to Ben and his estate. There have been over 400 recorded versions of this song, performed by many artists, including Otis Redding, Tracy Chapman, John Lennon, and Muhammad Ali. It was ranked 122 on Rolling Stone's list of the 500 greatest songs of all time. Probably a bit low. In 1999, BMI named it as the 4th most performed song of the 20th century, with about 7 million performances. It was put into the Grammy Hall of Fame in 1998. It went to number 16 in Canada, 27 in the UK, 4 in the US in 1961, and in 1986/87 went to 1 in Canada and the UK and 9 in the US. So a song having that kind of success 25, 26 years apart is quite an amazing thing. One of the greatest songs of all time. I do not throw around that kind of stuff lightly. Just fantastic. You know what it is? The second it comes on. Just fantastic and very similar to the first song. It's about love, and he's saying no matter what happens, if the sky should fall, I won't be afraid if you'll stand by me, like no matter what. When we go through good times and bad times, as long as I got you with me, everything is going to be all right. I like the arrangement on this. I think it's just fantastic. At number 8, we got a song I don't think I know, Durham Town by Roger Whittaker, and from 1976, sort of, in 1969 as well. Written by Roger and released as a single in 1969. Spent 18 weeks on the UK singles charts, peaking at number 12. In 1976, it reached number 8 on Canada's charts while reaching 23 on Billboard's Easy Listening charts. Under its original title, The Weaver, the song first appeared on his 1969 release, This Is Roger Whittaker. The track, renamed Durham Town and then in parentheses, The Leaving, was issued as a single in October of 69. He later recalled, I just didn't have any faith in the song at all. Far from promoting the single in Britain, I went off to Finland for a cabaret season and television appearances. The wake of the success Whittaker enjoyed with the song The Last Farewell in the summer of 1975 resulted in the reissue of this song. That's how it became a hit again. So I guess we'll go with originally. I said 76 at the start, 69. And on some of these songs, just on this list, there's multiple versions on Spotify. So in those instances, they're ranked in the order of times they've been played. I just choose the most played version, assuming, I'm not always right on that it's the most popular version that most of you will know. All right, Durham Town, telling a nice story here. His dad went away to war in 1944, sat there and watched the ships on the River Tyne, which there's a story of that I'm not going to get into. It's not the correct. He changed where the location of it was to Durham Town when it was going to be somewhere else, but he didn't change the river. But don't worry about that. But you don't have to tell me that in the comments if you know that story, because I do too. I just didn't go into it. But a really well-written song. And I promise, no pun intended, we're up to number 7. I Write the Songs by Barry Manilow from the album Trying to Get the Feeling from 1975. Ironically enough, even though Barry wrote over 400 songs, he did not write this song. Written by Bruce Johnston, of course, of the Beach Boys. Bruce first came to the Beach Boys in 1965 to replace Brian for the vocals on some tours and stuff, and then ended up leaving in 72, came back and still toured with him for all these years. But Barry's version reached number 1 in the U.S. in January of 76 and won a Grammy Award for Song of the Year. Was nominated for Record of the Year in 1977. Billboard ranked it as the 13th song of 1976, went to 3 in Canada, but in the U.S., it's 185 on the Billboard Hot 100 all-time chart. I also have a little story, a little personal connection to this song because my mom loved Barry Manilow. She didn't listen to a lot of music, but Barry Manilow, Neil Diamond, Elvis Presley, Kenny Rogers. That was kind of it. It was spinning whenever my mom did spin any music, and my dad was never around. When he did, he didn't listen to music. So I didn't have a huge musical background until I got into music myself at 9 or 10, and then I got way into it. But I do know this song, right? The original version, I didn't know this, was recorded by Captain and Tennille, who worked with Johnston in the early 1970s with the Beach Boys. The first release of it was by teen idol David Cassidy in 1975. That version reached 11 on the UK singles charts. So you might have known that version if you live in the UK. Johnston has stated that for him, the I in the song is God, and that songs come from the spirit of creativity in everyone. He said it is not about Brian Wilson. Manilow was initially reluctant to record the song, stating in his autobiography, Sweet Life, quote, "The problem with the song was that if you didn't listen carefully to the lyric, you would think that the singer was singing about himself," which is what I always thought. It could be misinterpreted as a monumental ego trip. After, end quote, after persuasion by Clive Davis, of course, then president of Arista Records, Manilow recorded the song, and his version of it was the first single taken from his album. And as I said, it's a wise decision, went to number 1. So I probably haven't heard this song. Well, I can't imagine that I would have heard this song since the late 70s, but I know it. Let's get it. All right, I Write the Songs. When you read the lyrics, you totally can see it's about God. It's blatantly obvious, but I mean, when you're 6 years old, you're not really doing that. But I mean, I wonder how many people really realize that. I mean, you just sing along to songs mindlessly a lot of times. So I was really interested in what I would think of this. I definitely have a different musical ear than what I did when I was 6 and, doing this channel and having over almost 3,300 videos up at the time I'm filming this. I have a vast musical knowledge at this point. It's really well done. The arrangement and the production is fantastic. And I mean, people, Barry used to be a punchline. People used to make fun of him. Now I don't think hardly anyone knows who he is. He's 81 years old. I mean, people of my age, barely remember him being famous. And if I would have had a mom that listened to him, I don't know that I would exactly know totally who he was, but he was huge. He sold over 85 million albums. That's insanity, man. And produced stuff and wrote stuff for several other artists. He's very, very well accomplished, but it's a good song, man. It held up. It held up in the build of the song. not just arrangement-wise, but vocally by Barry, really works. Now, as we come up to number 6, there's a song I know very well. Crazy for You from Madonna. It's from the Vision Quest soundtrack in 1985. A fantastic movie that I loved when I was in high school. Now, this one has an interesting story because Warner Brothers did not want to draw attention away from Like a Virgin's album and its singles, which was her first, mainstream. I mean, she had a bigger hits with the album previously with Borderline and Holiday, but this put her in the stratosphere. All the girls were trying to dress like Madonna with the fishnets, gloves, and different things. But so they didn't want to issue this as a single, but the producer kept pushing them. They finally did. It went all the way to number 1 in U.S., Australia, and Canada, 2 in Ireland, New Zealand, and the U.K. So it was a very, very good decision. It earned her first Grammy nomination for Best Female Pop Vocal Performance. And the song, it replaced it number 1 in the U.S. We Are the World. Let's go. All right, Crazy for You. This song brings back a lot of memories, man. Dances and those sorts of things, when you're first dating people and everybody was playing this song. A good vocal performance from Madonna. I think low-key hot take, Madonna's vocals weren't great early on, but her production on her songs, and they were very catchy. Her vocals got much better as we got into the later part of the 80s and into the 90s. Her vocal performance got much better. But a pretty good vocal performance here from her as well. And if you haven't checked out that movie, go do it. Next up at number 5, we got 110 Soldier by the original cast from the album 110 Soldier in 1969. I did a reaction to this song back in 2021. So if you want even more details of the song, I give it to you there, but I will give you quite a bit of details to it here because it's an important song. It's a 1960s countercultural era anti-war song written by Dennis Lambert and Brian Potter. Canadian pop group, the original cast, consisting of Dixie Lee Ennis, Bruce Ennis, Graham Bruce, Joseph Cavender, and Bliss Mackey. First recorded it in 1969, went to number 6 in Canada, they're a Canadian group, and 34 in the US. It was recorded by various artists and charted each year, very odd thing, from 1969 to 1974, 5 straight years on various charts in the US and Canada, never charted in any other country. It describes a story of 2 fictional kingdoms, the Mountain People, a peaceful group who possess a great treasure, and the Valley People, a warlike group who desire the treasure for themselves. The Valley People send a demand for the treasure to the Mountain People. In reply, the Mountain People offer to share it. The Valley People refuse the offer and end up committing genocide of the Mountain People. Once the treasure is located, it is revealed that it's actually a boulder inscribed with "Peace on Earth" on the bottom, implying the invasion was pointless. So a lot of people talk about it as being about the Vietnam War, and that's why I'm sure it charted for those 5 years from 69 to 74. Remember, the Vietnam War ended in 75. And it probably was to some extent, of course, but I think there was a more overarching meaning to the song. Singer Jinx Dawson of the band Coven performed the song at a 1971 session for the soundtrack of the film Billy Jack. So Coven, Jinx did it, but wanted the band to get credit for it. So that's why it's known to Coven, and it's called 110 Soldier. The Legend of Billy Jack, that version, reached 26 on the Billboard Hot 100 in the fall of 1971. And I know that's a lot of people in the U.S. know that version, but let's listen to this one. 110 Soldier, just a beautifully done song. Her voice is fantastic. The story of it is, it's anti-war, but that's simplifying what it's about. It's more about, just as much about peace and the pointlessness of war. I won't say that all wars are pointless, but almost all wars are pointless. And almost all wars are misrepresented for the reason that you're fighting them. And that's an example here. We're going to go to war because of this, but then you find that's really not why we're going to war. That really wasn't the problem to begin with. I will refrain from getting into specifics, but I have many of them in mind, but fantastic song. Next up, we have the great Frank Sinatra at number 4, I Get a Kick Out of You. Song by Cole Porter, first sung in the 1934 Broadway musical Anything Goes, and then a 1936 film version. Originally sung by Ethel Merman, it's covered by dozens of prominent performers, including, of course, Frank, Dolly Parton, Ella Fitzgerald, and MF Doom also used this in his song One Beer. I can't imagine MF Doom using this, but hey, man. A duet version by Tony Bennett and Lady Gaga was nominated for several Grammys when they had their run, so that might be the version. Frank Sinatra, I obviously knew who he was and never really listened to much of his music. I knew a few of his songs, but I didn't listen to them. But Jade, who brought this, her dad, Doug, did a Frank Sinatra top 10 and some other stuff with Frank. And made me just kind of fall in love with Frank. Right over here in my office here, there's a picture of the Rat Pack up, specifically because Doug gave me a love for that. So anyway, let's do this one. All right, the man himself, Sinatra, only how he can deliver a song with that confidence, right? I get a kick out of you. It doesn't get a kick out of all these other things that other people do. Alcohol, cocaine. So there's two different versions of this song. Well, there's many different versions of the song, but there's two different versions where cocaine was in there and then they took cocaine out, obviously because it wasn't something maybe you should sing about, although I think it's funny in here. I got the cocaine version. I didn't know when I chose it. When I did the research, I saw there were two different versions. There was no way to know which version was which, but he gets a kick out of her. So he doesn't get that. In other words, he didn't get that thrill out of all these other adrenaline things that you should. It's only her. So it's a love song just disguised in a different way. Cole Porter, fantastic writer. Rarefied Air, top 3, Coal Miner's Daughter, Loretta Lynn, off an album of the same name in 1970, although the singles were released first. Written by her and considered her signature song, it became number 1 in the U.S. country chart and Canada's country chart, and 83 on the U.S. Hot 100, her first song to chart on the U.S. Hot 100. It tells the story of her coal mining father in rural Kentucky during the Great Depression. She was born in 1932 and experienced the Great Depression as a child. Also describes her childhood and the circumstances she was raised in during those years. Now, there's 6 verses of this, but there was originally 10, and they made her take 4 of them out. So it was inducted in the Grammy Hall of Fame. In 2001, the RIAA, which is kind of the recording industry's big dog, named it one of their songs of the century. It's 255 on Rolling Stone's top 500 songs of all time. It's also the name of her autobiography. It's also the title of her 1980 movie about her. I didn't know a lot about Loretta. Actually, Cheryl, Jade's mom, brought Loretta Lynn song, and I had not really researched Loretta. I mean, I knew who she was as a kid, but I didn't know anything about her. So, she wrote and composed the music. Very rare, really cool stuff. All right, let's get it. Coal Miner's Daughter, such a fantastic written song. I wish that had the other 4 verses. Nowadays they'd record the whole thing, put it out on some sort of expanded version of the album. Loretta says she doesn't even know what those 4 verses were. She came and said years later, I wished I had those. I don't know what they are, and they've left my mind. But it tells a great story. You understand it as you listen to it. It just paints the picture. They didn't have shoes in the summer, but in the winter they all got a new pair. And her daddy always figured out a way. A lot of us can relate to that when it doesn't seem like we have much, but we figure out a way to provide for our kids. So fantastic choice at number 3. 2 songs left. We got My Way from Elvis Presley. Now, obviously, the version that most know is the great Frank Sinatra one, but I don't know that I've ever heard Elvis's version. I think I have probably. But the song itself is so iconic. I'm going to tell you a little bit of the story behind it. Not all of it. This was in the Frank Sinatra Top 10. I actually did a song reaction to this back in the day as well, so you can check those out if you want more detail, but this is going to be pretty good. Paul Anka's English version of a French song, which was first released by Sinatra in 1969. Success for a variety of performances, including Frank, Elvis. Sinatra's version of My Way spent 75 weeks in the UK Top 40, which is the 4th most weeks in the UK chart history. So this song is obviously iconic. This is something I didn't remember if I knew this from the research when I did it. In 1968, seeking to capitalize on the song's European success, music publisher David Pitt asked a young David Bowie, who was then working as a for-hire songwriter, to tackle an English version of the lyrics to the French song, which I'm not going to say because I have respect for the French language. I'm not going to butcher it, for release in English-speaking markets. Bowie wrote and recorded a demo version of his interpretation called Even a Fool Learns to Love, but the song was not formally recorded and the project was shelved. Bowie later developed his idea into a wholly original song, Life on Mars, which became a hit single for him and one of his signature songs. Fantastic song. We have that album up, Hunky Dory. Go check that out. Very early in the channel's lifetime. Paul heard the French original while on holiday in the south of France. He flew to Paris to negotiate the rights to the song. He acquired adaptation, recording, and publishing rights for the nominal but formal consideration of $1. But it was subject to the provision that the 3 songwriters would retain their original share of royalty rights with respect to whatever versions Anka or his designates created or produced. So that's how they made a ton of money. Sometime later, Anka had a dinner in Florida with Frank Sinatra, and, quote, he said, a couple of mob guys, during which Sinatra said, I'm quitting the business. I'm sick of it. I'm getting the hell out. So Paul decided to redo this song for him. He said, at 1 o'clock in the morning, I sat down at an old IBM electric typewriter and said, if Frank were writing this, what would he say? And I started metaphorically, and I know the end is near. I read a lot of periodicals, and I noticed everything was my this and my that. We were in the me generation, and Frank became the guy for me to use to say that. I used words I would never use. I ate it and spit it out. But that's the way he talked. I used to be around steam rooms with the Rat Pack guys. They liked to talk like mob guys, even though they would have been scared of their own shadows. He finished the song at 5 in the morning. He said, quote, I called up Frank in Nevada. He was at Caesar's Palace and said, I've got something really special for you. When my record company caught wind of it, they were very pissed that I didn't keep it for myself. I said, hey, I can write it, but I'm not the guy to sing it. It was for Frank and no one else. Now, Elvis began performing the song in concerts during the mid-'70s, but Anka actually went to him and said, don't do that because the song doesn't suit you. But Elvis is going to go to the beat of his own drummer. On October 3rd, 1977, several weeks after his death, his live recording of this was released as a single. In the U.S., it reached number 22 on the Billboard Hot 100 charts, which is higher than Frank's peak position. Number 6 on the adult contemporary chart, and went gold for successful sales of over 1 million copies. In the UK, it reached number 9 on the UK singles chart. Now, I talked to you about versions earlier. There's so many versions of this song because there's all these compilations from Elvis. Like, they just tried to really cash in on this man, and they still are a little bit to this day. But so I chose the most played version. Whether it's live or not, I have no idea. I mean, I think it would be because I don't think he ever put it down in a recording studio, but I couldn't find much on the Elvis side of it. So you and me are both going to be surprised on it. Number 2. All right. Obviously, I know the Sinatra version and believe it's just unparalleled. But it's a good version. I mean, I think Elvis could do this with his voice. Elvis has been, when I was younger, I remember Elvis dying. It's one of the seminal moments in my life. I remember him dying. I was 6 years old. I barely turned 6 years old. I remember my grandma calling my mom on the phone, and my mom was crying. I didn't know why. It's because Elvis died. Like, that's the power he had. Retrospectively, a lot of people want to go with Elvis nowadays, but he's one of the most successful, not only musical artists, but just cultural icons of all time. It's insanity, the things that he accomplished. So really good job on this version of it. And here we are, number 1 on Jade's top 10 songs of her mom and dad, of Doug and Cheryl. We got The Show Must Go On, Queen, from the Innuendo album in 1991. It was the 12th and final track on this album. It is credited to Queen, but was primarily written by guitarist Brian May. It chronicles the effort of frontman Freddie Mercury continuing to perform despite approaching the end of his life, although his diagnosis with HIV/AIDS had not yet been made public in spite of ongoing media speculation that he was seriously ill. It was released as a single in the UK in October of 1991 in promotion of the Greatest Hits 2 album, just 6 weeks before Freddie died. Following his death, the song re-entered the British charts and spent as many weeks in the top 75 as it did upon its original release, initially reaching a peak of 16. Brian had a couple things to say about this. First, in 1994, Brian May said, The Show Must Go On came from Roger and John playing the sequence, and I started to put things down. At the beginning, it was just this chord sequence, but it had this strange feeling it could be somehow important. And I got very impassioned and went and hammered away at it. I sat down with Freddie, and we decided what the theme should be and wrote the first verse. It's a long story, that song, but I always felt it would be important because you were dealing with things that were hard to talk about at the time. But in the world of music, you could do it. All the way up in 2023, Brian said, I presented it to him in the studio, and by that time he was suffering a lot. He could hardly stand. I played him some of the demo with me singing, which went incredibly high and was very difficult. In the past, Freddie was always shouting at me like, it's too effing high. You're making me ruin my beautiful voice. So he downed a couple of vodkas neat, then propped himself up on the desk and worked his way through singing all of that song. And it was amazing. I think he did 3 or 4 takes, and he absolutely smashed that vocal. It's like he reached into a place that even he'd never got to before. I remember saying to Freddie, I don't want you to hurt yourself. Don't force yourself to do it if it's not going to feel good. But he said, I'll effing do it, Brian. And he did, and it was beautiful. I think it's one of his finest performances of all time. It's incredible. I don't really know this song very well. I know it sort of. I couldn't tell you one word of it, but let's get it. All right, The Show Must Go On. I think it suffered just a little bit from production of 1991, right? Fantastic performance. I maybe heard this song once or twice. When you realize the story behind it, the lyrics, like what went into it for Freddie, it's an amazing performance. It's a freaking amazing performance. The reason why I don't know is never hit in the US. I mean, I talked about this only in the UK and went to 16 on re-release after his death, but a fantastic song. The keys on there, Brian May did those. It was of the time, right? Those suffered a little bit on here, but yeah, it's a good song. All right, now we're going to go to my favorite tracks. You know, I'll reiterate again, Jade put this together for her parents, two former patrons of ours who passed away last year in 2024, Cheryl and Doug. When you're putting, I imagine it was not easy to do this. When you're putting together a list like this, I mean, all the songs are going to be fantastic, right? So picking favorites is just kind of like a flip of the coin. Honorable mention, I'm going to go with Can't Take My Eyes Off of You, Frankie Valli. I'm going to go with Crazy for You from Madonna. I mean, there are other, quote, better songs, music on here, yeah, but I mean, you know, it's got a place connected to my childhood. And Coal Miner's Daughter by Loretta Lynn would also be an honorable mention. So well written. Faves are going to be Stand By Me and this last song, The Show Must Go On. So thank you to Jay for bringing this. Let me know what your favorite tracks are down below of these. Appreciate you guys watching. And until next time, I will see you.